Hi, everyone, and welcome to Inside the Americas. Coming up in this edition, U.S. President Biden comforts the families of victims of the country's latest mass shooting. A massacre fueled by racial hatred against black people, Mr. Biden takes on white supremacy in an emotional speech. The U.S. is lifting travel restrictions on Cuba. The White House scraps a policy of the Trump administration, also doing away with some economic sanctions. And it's a heartbreaking casualty of the pandemic. Thousands of children in Peru have been left orphans after losing their parents to COVID-19. Well, we begin this edition in Buffalo, New York, which was the site of a massacre motivated by racial hatred. An 18-year-old went on a shooting rampage, killing 10 and injuring 3, with the express purpose of targeting black people. President Biden visited the site of the attack and spoke out against white supremacy, saying it was a poison in our body politic. Kara Scarlin has the story.
Arriving at the scene of the United States' deadliest racist attack since he took office, Joe Biden and his wife Jill laid flowers and said a prayer. Shortly afterwards, in a searing and emotional speech, the president denounced what he called the perverse ideology believed to have inspired the shooter.
White supremacy is a poison, and it's been allowed to fester and grow right in front of our eyes. No more. I mean, no more. We need to say as clearly and forcefully as we can that the ideology of white supremacy has no place in America.
10 African Americans were murdered and 3 other people were injured in Saturday's shooting at a Buffalo supermarket. The 18-year-old white man accused of carrying out the terrorist attack referred to the so-called Great Replacement conspiracy theory in a manifesto. In his speech, Biden specifically took aim at the theory, which claims the existence of a leftist plot to replace the population with non-white immigrants. His trip to Buffalo highlights how little the president has achieved in curbing gun violence, something Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer vowed to work on.
I pledge to stand with you, to work in the Senate to oppose the poison of white supremacy that inspired this attack, to work towards finally ridding our streets of weapons of war.
Biden conceded it would be difficult to do more on gun control. He's asked Congress to require new background checks for gun buyers and ban assault weapons, but Democrats who largely support such measures don't have enough votes to pass them.
And sadly, the shooting is not an isolated incident. There's been a long history of racist attacks in the U.S. carried out by white supremacists. Jenny Shin has that part of the story.
Racially motivated attacks are on the rise in the United States. The COVID-19 pandemic fueled violence against the Asian community over the country. In March 2021, a 21-year-old man targeted 3 massage parlors in Atlanta, leaving 8 dead, including 6 women of Asian origin. Activists say the statement of Donald Trump, president at the time of the outbreak of the pandemic, only amplified anti-Asian hate.
When the President of the United States calls the coronavirus the China virus, Kung flu, that's an insult to all of us as Asians.
In August of 2019, a massacre of 23 people in a supermarket in Texas by a man claiming to be a far-right militant. In a statement to the police, he explained he wanted to kill as many Mexicans as possible. A year earlier, in 2018, a white supremacist burst into a Pittsburgh synagogue and shot 11 people to death in what became the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in the history of the United States.
This is the most horrific crime scene I've seen in 22 years with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Members of the Tree of Life Synagogue, conducting a peaceful service in their place of worship, were brutally murdered by a gunman targeting them simply because of their faith.
And in June of 2015, a 21-year-old man opened fire in a church in South Carolina, claiming the lives of 9 African Americans. In the past several years, the so-called Great Replacement theory has been gaining ground in the U.S. The racist conspiracy theory claims that the white population will be gradually replaced to extinction by non-white immigrants. Investigators of mass shootings found that the xenophobic theory has inspired several perpetrators of recent attacks.
President Biden has lifted travel controls between the U.S. and Cuba, undoing restrictions put in place by the Trump administration. The White House is also reversing some economic sanctions. Camille Nedelec has more.
It's an on-again, off-again relationship. But for now, things between Cuba and the US are warming up, and Washington is easing its chokehold on the Cuban economy. There'll no longer be limits on money transfers between the US and Cuba, and Cubans trying to rejoin family members in the US will be allowed to immigrate. It's a relief for locals in Havana.
Almost all Cubans have family in the United States, and that means a lot to Cubans. To receive help, not only financially, but also to be able to go to the United States, and for those who are there to come here and be able to see their families.
These changes don't quite match up to the raft of measures rolled out by the Obama administration almost a decade ago, but they do mark a break with the limitations imposed on Havana by former US President Donald Trump a few years later. President Joe Biden's decision to overturn them is a domestic political move as well as a diplomatic one.
This announcement is a positive step. Although it's not a return to Obama's policy, this is clearly a rejection of Trump's policy. Second, the statement indicates that they will implement it quickly and not wait.
The embargo imposed by President Kennedy forbids almost all trade with Cuba, and it isn't set to be lifted anytime soon. At the time, the United States was hoping to bring down the communist regime, which is yet to fall 60 years later. Some neighbouring countries want the restrictions to be swept away entirely.
I would like there to be no blockade, because it is a violation of human rights. It is a medieval policy from another age.
The loosening of restrictions is a vital breath of fresh air in Cuba after the pandemic and embargo triggered a severe economic crisis, with inflation levels nearing 70%.
In Peru, the COVID pandemic has left thousands of children orphaned. It's estimated that some 100,000 minors have lost at least one parent to the disease, and that's our number of the week. The government is now struggling to care for these children. We get this report from our correspondent, Thomas Nicolon.
Voy a pedir a los tres que cierren sus ojitos. A los tres, por unos momentos, y van a imaginar cómo se visualizan ustedes de acá, digamos, o 1 año o 5 años. A ver, tú, Dylan, ¿cómo te has visualizado?
Me sentí como en Cusco, así, terminando mi tarea.
¡Ay, qué bonito! Que estabas en Cusco.
Sí, en Cusco, pe.
Usted, señora Jenny, ¿cómo se ha visualizado?
Bueno, teniendo un trabajo fijo y después más adelante un negocio propio.
Un negocio propio. Muy bien. Entonces...
Focusing on the future to get over the grief. Dylan and his sister Graciela lost their father to COVID. Their mother, Jenny, was left without an income, and she is struggling to provide for the family. She receives help from the state-run National Family Welfare Program, or INABIF. Every 2 months, she's given €100 per child.
My husband passed 2 years ago, and it still hurts. This allowance enables me to take care of my children, at least for now. It means I don't have to worry about school tuition and groceries. We were left with nothing when he died, so it's a big help for us.
Beyond financial help, the INABIF provides children who lost a parent to COVID with psychological support.
The emotional aspect is even more important because we help them to use strategies and tools so that they're able to cope with the hardship.
In Peru, around 100,000 children have lost at least one of their 2 parents during the pandemic. It's more than anywhere else in the world. As of today, about 18,000 families in this difficult situation receive financial aid from the INABIF. In this family from the San Juan de Lurigancho district in Lima, the father died of COVID. His wife and children now find themselves in complete despair.
I lost my house, but at least there's always a solution for material things. But I lost my husband. I did everything I could to save him. I even went into debt, but he died. There were times when I thought I wouldn't be able to go on, but thank God my children are here. They give me the strength to keep going. Also, I get this stipend now, which is a precious help. What are you drawing? Go show us. Everything she does in school, she hangs on her dad's photo.
Peru was hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. For months, hospitals across the country couldn't treat all patients. With 212,000 deaths in a population of less than 33 million, the country has the highest COVID death rate worldwide. Today, even though the pandemic is slowing down, the impacts are still felt in Peru, and the INABIF is planning on supporting more orphans throughout the country.
We want to start by reaching 25,000 families, and then we aim to reach 90,000 in the next few years. We're working to register all orphans, something that's never been done before in Peru, and numbers are probably higher than we originally thought.
In Lima's poorest districts, the pandemic wreaked havoc. Many orphans and widows must go to soup kitchens every day or face going hungry. Over 3 million Peruvians fell into poverty since the pandemic started in March 2020. Despite the state giving financial help to many families, the future is filled with uncertainties for Peru's COVID orphans.
That's it for this edition of Inside the Americas. There's more world news coming up here on France 24. Stay with us.
Tout d'un coup, on a entendu des coups de feu. Tout le monde criait, tout le monde, qu'est-ce qu'il y a? Il y a les militaires blancs là qui tirent sur les rebelles de la guerre là.
On December 1st, 1944, in the military camp of Thiaroye on the outskirts of Dakar, a group of Senegalese riflemen were shot dead by their French brothers in arms. They had just been repatriated after having fought side by side and were simply asking to be paid. Described first as a mutiny, then as a revolt by the French army, this long-ignored episode is now thought to have been a deliberate massacre. 3 young artists are setting out to explore the memory of the tragedy.
La vérité finira par prévaloir, et à ce moment-là, la réconciliation sincère et définitive devient possible.
Watch Reporters Plus, Thiaroye 44 on France 24 and France24.com.